Throughout the last 200 years, police forces over the country have protected and served the community. In 1962, a constable called John Elliott joined the Dorset Police to make a difference. This is his story.
Clap it.
Yeah. Did you always want to be a police officer?
Well, I did. Having attended school and living in a village, I became accustomed to what the local bobby used to do, ride about on his bike and talk. Always spoke to us kids, and I was quite impressed. So it filtered into my mind that being in the police force could be good.
How long were you in the police?
Altogether, just over 32 years.
How is policing different back then than now?
Back in those days, obviously, we had no radios and that sort of thing, so it was done by telephone kiosks and the occasional police box. But I think a lot of influence today is by the internet and things like TikTok and various things like that, which are having, in some ways, quite a serious influence on the younger generation of our society. We didn't have that in my day, and that didn't start surfacing until sort of the late 90s and into the next century, really. A major thing really is mobile phones. We didn't have radios in those days, and mobile phones didn't surface until the early 90s. The mobile phone was quite large. It was about, it's quite heavy, but it did work, just about, but I couldn't speak to many because not many other people had a mobile phone.
Do you have any stories from when you were in CID?
Probably too many to mention, really, because I was involved almost immediately on a murder inquiry, and that would take some weeks, to be involved in, from taking witness statements to that sort of thing. House-to-house inquiries, there's many things associated with a serious crime that continues for some distance. Even if you get the offender, it never stops there. It has to continue to get all the evidence that should be produced and put before the court.
Are there any cases that still bother you to this day?
I suppose at the end of the day, I can reflect and put up one or two, and it's generally the more serious crimes where when I attended the scene of a murder or something like that, I can recall the circumstances of seeing the particular person that was very, very seriously injured. I'll just go back on one thing that does stick in my mind a little bit. We did have a report of a young girl in a small town centre that had suddenly disappeared. And we did some inquiries, and I was involved on the house-to-house. And I went into one particular place, and I got some answers from the particular owner, and I felt uncomfortable with the way in which he had spoken to me. And I went back and spoke to others and said I'm not very happy about this particular individual. And anyway, we went back, and we eventually got into his premises, which was a shop, and we went in there and spoke to him, and we said, well, we're going to search the premises, and as a result of which, unfortunately, we found a black sack. In that black sack was the body of a young girl, and that really has remained with me some time, but he is now serving a long prison sentence and unlikely to return.
What did you choose to do after you became a detective? Like after you were a detective, what did you do?
Once I became that, obviously we went on courses, detective courses, which were at Bristol then. I attended that, and obviously there was a lot of chatting amongst those that were on the particular courses. But one thing that came out of that was the fact that a lot of them were studying for their promotion exams. And so that's something which dwelt in my mind when I came back from that. Having attended and And one of my senior officers spoke to me one day and said, you won't pass your exam. And I said, no, but I'm thinking. So eventually, or within that 12 months, I did in fact take the exam and I did qualify. And in fact, I did get promoted very, very soon after that. I qualified to the rank of sergeant. So that I then became a detective sergeant with my own little squad. And so then I felt, well, that's good. I liked the idea of having a little bit of authority that I could help steer the squad into the right directions and give them a bit of advice if they needed it, or they'd give me a bit of advice if I needed it. So we worked as a team. It wasn't an individual thing, I'm the sergeant or anything like that. It was a team with a principal objective of sorting the crime out or helping the public on sorting their problems out, which we all enjoyed. Following my sergeant promotion, I then subsequently, after a couple of years, took the inspector's exam, and I then went on a special operation for about 3 to 4 years. And then after I was then promoted to Detective Chief Inspector, where I continued with the crime, but having a bigger section and a bigger area to cover. And then following that, I was then transferred, in fact, from CID, and I then went into the operations department, where I was then promoted to superintendent. So I stepped away from the CID duties, and I became the operational commander for the big operations that we used to run.
What led up to you protecting the royal family?
We had various royal people coming in, including Prince Charles, as he was now King Charles, Princess Anne, and various other people that came out, Princess Diana, and various other notorieties from a royal visit point of view, and each was dealt with in the same way. And I'd normally meet the royal as well, and they normally gave a thank you as to what we'd done in Dorset. So it was very entertaining. And I remember one particular incident where Princess Anne came in a helicopter and landed at a local school in Wimborne, and I think everybody was well pleased to see that transpire. But again, that was all security based, and everybody there was at a distance, and everything worked well, thankfully.
Do you have any stories with politicians visiting?
We had the Tory Party conference in my time twice, and we had Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, who was then the Prime Minister, John Major on a second occasion after he then took over as Prime Minister. They were both very good to deal with, but obviously I met, after each conference, I met up with the Prime Ministers, who were very thankful. I generally invited them to my office, where we had a cup of tea and a chat. And on both occasions, it was both regarded well. So I was very thankful for that.
What was your interactions with Margaret Thatcher like, and how is she as a person?
Very nice, a very nice lady. I also met her husband. And in fact, we did have tea, and obviously I think we had a few sandwiches as well at the time, just to say thank you, and it was well regarded. And of course, bearing in mind, I saw them more or less immediately after they'd given their final speech. So from their point of view, it was nice just to relax and just get back to normal.
Do you have any stories abroad as a police officer?
I did go abroad, but that was in relation to a course which I attended, and I was lucky to go on that particular course. And then following that, I was invited across the border into eastern Germany, just after the wall had been come down. And in fact, I stayed across there in various places, but I was shocked to see the state of the country at that particular time, and it hadn't recovered from what it had been through prior to the war coming down. And I visited one or two police stations out there, and they were very sort of not very forward, and they really had really old cars and things like that, which I was quite not amused at, but surprised that they were quite well behind the rest of us in modern day policing at that time.
Do you remember any terror attacks like the one in Bournemouth when they put the stuff in bombs in the shops?
Yeah, I was the divisional commander at that particular time in Bournemouth, having also done the conferences, and it was reported, obviously, to me and to us of the incident. I think about 7 incendiary devices were spread across the town. I can't remember the finer points because it's some distance away from my mind now. But I'm aware that we did obviously react to that. I don't think at the end of the day there were any convictions, and I'm not sure whether or not we identified any individual that was responsible for it. But we sense it may well have come from across the water, those responsible. But it was never taken before the court.
If you had a chance, would you do it all over again?
Absolutely. I know today is a totally different situation, but I think in my mind I could turn myself around to accommodate today's problems, but whether I could satisfy everything, particularly as far as the mobile phone situation is concerned, and I'm not against mobile phones, don't get me wrong, but the various other companies are sliding in certain information that shouldn't go. It's quite difficult, but I think yes is the answer. I would love to be involved in it today as a young constable with a nice future attached to it, and whether I could do something, I feel that I possibly could. Yeah, certainly. Oh, just get my legs going. Sorry about that.